Welcome back to Ron's Radio Corner. And in front of you is a vintage ICF-9740W table radio. This is very much the sort of radio I remember, as a kid. And I've talked about table radios in a few other videos and sort of my weird like for them, right? I mean, I've had other radios growing up, from the 80s boom boxes to 70s Sanyo AM/FM cassette deck that I really kind of miss. I had component stereo systems, but these have always had some sort of soft place in my heart. I've talked about the realistic radios, mostly because as a kid, you go in the mall, there was always a Radio Shack. You'd pop in to see what was, going on at Radio Shack, anything cool. And I would see these radios, or I would pick up a Radio Shack catalog, and they would have, these realistic radios in it. But these Sony radios were always really popular, and you would see these in flyers, and you would see these in certain stores, and for me, this was kind of an accidental purchase. I saw it on eBay. I thought it looked in really nice shape, and there really wasn't any interest in it. It had a really low starting price. As the auction was winding down, and I saw that there really wasn't much going on with this, but I saw a lot of potential watchers. So I thought I would throw in a really low bid and watch, sort of like the seagulls pounce. Because I've seen that in other auctions, for other items, and I've always thought that was interesting. No interest, and the last second, everybody bids. Except this time, at the last second, everybody didn't bid, and I wound up with a Sony table radio. Now, the good thing is, it looked to be in pretty good condition, and when I got it here and unboxed it, I was happy that it's in pretty good condition, because that's not always the case. Sometimes the things you see in the pictures don't look as good once they show up at your doorstep. I guess the next good thing is, if you're going to get a vintage table radio, as long as it's working, a Sony's probably not a bad one to pick up. The interesting thing is, if you go look, you will see that like everybody made a similar table radio to this. Maybe slightly bigger, slightly smaller. Maybe the dial is oriented a different way or something. But there are Panasonic table radios like this, the realistic table radios like this. I've seen Sound Design table radios like this. I think I've seen Zenith table radios like this. General Electric, GE, had some table radios very much like this, and then it seems like they had one that I'm assuming is considerably smaller, but I would need to go and grab a tape measure, and plastic cased. That seems to be like, you look at table radios, they're all over the place. Everybody made sort of this basic model, simple radio. Now, my thoughts on this, I have, I'm filming this, and literally, I can't quite touch it, but to my side is my Sangean WR16, which I would be tempted to kind of put over and put right next to this, just as a comparison, but I would have to unplug it from behind the couch and drag it over, and I just didn't want to do that. But the interesting thing with this is that, adjusting for inflation, I don't know what this radio would have went for brand new, but I'll bet you, adjusting for inflation, this radio is roughly the cost of what one of those Sangean radios are brand new. So I mention that as just a comparison, that you look at this radio, and if you go look at a brand new Sangean radio, you're probably looking at something that should have been considered relatively comparable. Are they comparable? Well, I mean, I will tell you, sound quality, yeah. I'll turn this on in just a second, but my initial thoughts on this, is the sound is really good. It's got a nice big speaker. You know, the first thing that I went and compared it to, just because I just got this the other day, was the Sangean's shower radio that I just did a video on. And I have been using that shower radio fairly steadily, like for the last week. You know, sort of as I predicted. Almost, I kind of wonder if that'll end up superseding my use of other radios. But in the morning, I just grab that radio, fire it up, walk into the kitchen, you know, put on my coffee and pop it over on the counter, you know, brush my teeth, you know, shave, whatever I need to do, and that radio, because it's waterproof, kind of follows me around, and it sounds good. This sounds worlds better, a much better speaker. And then I listened to the WR16, the Sangean WR16, which has got a great sound, and I think this might actually be a little bit better than that. I grabbed my GE Super Radio 3, right? And the Super Radio 3 is really, you know, known for having a really good sound, and I think this might sound better than that. I mean, the GE Super Radio 3 sounds really good, and I put them side by side, and I was going back and forth, and I'm like, you know, there are differences, and there's always going to be differences. You know that, I guess when you're designing a radio like this, and you're choosing the speaker and the cabinet, and you're going to get a different sound. You're probably looking for a slightly different sound. This has got a really nice, deeper sound to it. So here you are looking at this vintage radio, and really, this sounds just as good as the Sangean, which is relatively new. It sounds good as the Super Radio 3, which is really known for its sound quality. It's a really simple radio, and it's really easy to use. Let's see, let me fire this up. So
10 degrees. Becoming partly sunny.
Some problem areas are, we try to saturate that area with people.
Being careful of the volume.
So use Progressive's AutoQuote Explorer.
Street.
Christmas time.
Okay.
So, yep, for the holidays.
There's no shade, give me there's the farmer. When your father kills son one morning. There's no shade, give me yeah.
So basic tour of the radio, and unfortunately a lot of talk there. I think where I am, like geographically, picking up the classic music station that I've tuned in on some of the videos in the past, it's kind of tough to get a clear signal, and I don't have an antenna hooked up to this, but it does have a really nice sound. I'm being very conscious that a lot of times I film these, and when I play them back, even though the volume doesn't sound extremely loud to me, that on the playback the volume is really loud. So basic tour of the radio. This is a really, really simple radio, right? On-off volume switch here, a tone switch, which is a nice thing to have. There's a loudness, right? Off-on switch, and then the band select for AM, FM, and then this nice big tuning knob. It is really easy to tune. Not sloppy. There's a nice feel to the tuning knob. It's not like you can just kind of spin it and there's no resistance, no nothing. There's a nice feel. It's not. I mean, when I use the Sangean WR16 and I'm tuning it, I kind of wonder if they got some sort of gear reduction in there, because that knob's got a really nice feel to it. This doesn't have that sort of feel, but I can feel that I'm, moving the mechanism, and it's just got a nice weight to it. Like I said, it's got a great sound. I really kind of think, in some ways, I kind of wonder, I don't think there's a market for these sort of radios anymore, or at least not a big market. There's obviously a market, because if you go on Amazon, there's 1 million of these radios. Not these radios, but table radios. But I kind of wonder, like, could Sony come out with these again and sell them? And if they did, would you pay the type of money you might have paid for this back in the 80s? Or would you expect more today? Now, one thing I really dislike about this radio is this cabinet is just particle board. It is, if you've ever bought any of that furniture that you assemble yourself, which is sort of made out of like some sort of wood scrap, and glued together, and then a thin layer of veneer over it. That is what this radio is made of. And to be honest with you, I think most of the competition back then, this is what the radio was made out of. When I look at the Panasonics and the Realistics and even some of the GEs, there are a lot of the GEs, the plastic case, but even some of the GEs, it is this compressed wood with, veneer, contact paper, I don't know what you want to call it. It looks nice. It looks presentable, but it's not, it's not a nice wood cabinet. And I know, well, I don't know, but the Sangean WR16 has a wood cabinet. I doubt that it's, some oak or maple that they've, milled into a cabinet. It's probably an MDF or some sort of composite wood put together. But you would almost say if Sony were to come back out with this radio today, that would be something that would probably need to change. Maybe make it an all plastic cabinet, which would probably make it not as nice, or at least change the sound, or come up with some sort of other, cabinet. And one of the unfortunate things about these sort of cabinets is a lot of times when I see these radios, these cabinets have not held up. The vinyl's peeling away. There's some warping to it. They get water damaged. So this one's in nice shape, and I'm happy. But if Sony were to come out with this again, that would probably need to be changed. And I'm somewhat surprised when I see some of these things, and the cabinet is just beat to heck, that someone hasn't, someone with a little woodworking skill hasn't just come up with their own wood cabinet for this. Because if you knew what you were doing, which I don't, but if you knew what you were doing, it probably wouldn't be hard to take the guts out of one of these things and build a nice little wooden cabinet for it. The dial band on this doesn't light up. There's no backlight to it. That's disappointing, because I know that Sony had radios where that did, and I know that the competition had radios where the dial band lit up. It's really disappointing that it doesn't have that. There is no, there's no signal light when you tune into a really strong station. I find that a little disappointing, because certainly that sort of light was on a lot of other radios of the time. And these weren't necessarily cheap. I mean, this wasn't like your bargain basement model. That probably would have been the sound design. So it's a little disappointing that it doesn't have, those features. But it does have, like I said, a wonderful sound. And I could grab the Super Radio 3 and bring it over here and compare the two, and try to bring the Sangean over and compare the two. And maybe in a future video I'll do that, but take my word for it, out of the radios I have, the Sangean and the Super Radio 3 are probably the two radios I would put alongside this that I own, to kind of compare the sound. It really is a really, really nice radio. And it does make me a little sad that they don't make them anymore. Sony really doesn't seem to make much in the way of radios, and I kind of get that. So if Sony were to decide to make this again, I mean, I think backlit dial and something a little light to show you when you've hit a strong frequency would be a plus. I think upgrading the cabinet material would be a plus. I think The need to add Bluetooth is almost essential. I like the style of it. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it retro. I mean, you might look at it today and say it's retro because it certainly harkens to a time that's not now. But there's something about it that's just sort of honest. In a way that I think the Sangean is also sort of an honest design. If you look at the WR16 or the WR11, that whole model in Sangean is like made a million models out of that same basic box. But if you look at Amazon and or any other online site, and you look at table radios, they all seem to like cloyingly try to replicate a vintage look. Either I've seen some that kind of look like maybe the style of radio from the cathedral radio days. Some are out there that kind of, just have enough similarity to maybe like an old Grundig or something like that. And they're great looking radios, but you can tell they're going for that really retro vibe look. You have there's a couple out there that are probably much smaller than this. And I'd have to go and look at the dimensions, but wooden radio, cloth in the front. It's got the retro style dial on one side, and it's got a few knobs, and depending on when I go on Amazon, it's a different name of who's selling it. Again, I think that's trying very hard to look like a vintage radio. I think what's nice about this, and I kind of wish there was a radio like this right now, other than the Sangean or the Tivoli. I wish someone would just design a radio and say, here's sort of a traditional looking radio, but we're not going to go crazy trying to make it look like it's from the 1940s or the 1950s or the 1960s. Or maybe I'm just completely wrong, and really what I'm asking is someone to come out with a vintage radio that looks like it's from, the 70s or 80s. I don't know. So that's basically it. Here's the Sony table radio. It's really a great sounding one. It's kind of unfortunate. If I had bought this at a yard sale for the price I paid for the radio, it would be a heck of a steal. It wasn't ridiculous with the shipping, but the shipping certainly kind of bumps it up to the point where, it's not a $10 radio. It's maybe a $20 radio. But even then, if you look at something like the cheapest Sangeans, brand new, and they're going for like $80, $90, if you were to find a really, really nice Sony table radio, one that worked, preferably someplace where you could actually try it out, maybe a consignment shop or antique shop or whatever. If you had an interest in a table radio, this might be a great way to go, because even if you got one for $25, that's less than a third the price. And I would be very happy listening to this instead of the Sangean. I mean, I like the Sangean. I'm not going to get rid of it, but putting the two side by side, if I had this and a friend of mine had the Sangean, I would not be saying to myself, "Wow, I really wish I had the Sangean instead." Except for mine is the WR16 with the Bluetooth, and this one doesn't do that. But AM FM, I mean, the sound is very, very similar. It's a quality radio, even years removed. So that's it. That's all I'll say about this, at least in this video. So thanks for watching. Till the next time.